Well, thank you, Mr. Ali Zakri, alias Chairman of Malaysia Venture Capital Management, and Mr. Jivan Raju, Country Head of Tata Consultancy Services Malaysia, for a very interesting discussion on business agility, sustainable business growth in the new normal. Thank you to Ali Zakri in particular. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and ideas on sustainability in business. And also thank you for sharing the 101 on how to do the transformation. Thanks a lot. We got lots of nuggets and ideas and inputs from Mr. Ali Zakri today. Thank you so much. That was the first fireside session. We still got a few more coming up later, all the way until 5 o'clock. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to our next session immediately, which is another keynote address on leveraging IR 4.0 for the net zero economy. Our next speaker was appointed as the German ambassador to Malaysia since October 2020. Now, prior to coming to Malaysia, he was the German Consul General to Siberia and Far East Russian Federation, and he was the German ambassador to the Republic of Congo, Republic of Uganda, and Republic of Kosovo. And he has held various senior positions in German embassies and foreign offices. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome His Excellency Ambassador Dr. Peter Blomeyer, German Ambassador to Malaysia.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Rahim, for your kind introduction. Dear Mr. Feroz Nadar, Executive Director of UN Global Compact Network, Malaysia and Brunei. Dear Mrs. Miriam Fischer, Director in Malaysia Office of Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I acted quite carelessly when agreeing spontaneously to Mrs. Fischer's invitation to hold this keynote speech. Soon I had to find out that the topic is complicated. And since IR 4.0 has not reached my brain yet, directly connecting it with internet, research work in the conventional way by reading was inevitable. But by reading, I quickly caught interest and was fascinated by the subject of this festival, which I believe can really make a substantial difference if addressed properly. I would like to share with you three observations. The first is about SMEs' relevance for the economy and for society, and thus for the attainment of SDGs. After all, this is an SME SDG Festival. I understand that we want to celebrate here the contribution of SMEs to SDGs. This might come a little premature since SDGs are a medium-term projection to be achieved by 2030. But it is true that SMEs can and have to make a major contribution if SDGs are to be reached. I consider it a major breakthrough that the UN has recognized SMEs as highly relevant players when designing the new SDGs. They play a decisive role in attaining each and every of the 17 SDGs. In most countries, SMEs are paramount for the creation of jobs and income, for the production of food, for the allocation of water, for providing health services and for education, for all vital facilities you can think of. We need to see, though, that production by SMEs is also coming at an environmental cost. Air, water, and soil pollution and energy consumption. But at the same time, we depend on SMEs to develop sustainable solutions for exactly these environmental problems, for the energy transition, for coping with the plastic tsunami, for fighting against the degradation of our forests, for shaping new materials and designing new products. All these activities coincide with the 17 SDGs. And the progress in society itself also depends on SMEs if you think, for instance, of gender, justice, and equal pay. And SMEs can play a major role in education by vocational training. Please allow me to spell out the impact of SMEs on the economy and society at the example of Germany, whose economy most people associate with our big companies like Siemens, VW, BMW, Mercedes, or our big chemical companies. This perception, however, does not reflect reality. In Germany, we have 3.5 million SMEs who account for 99.5% of all companies in the country. They also account for 57% of employment and for 87% of the vocational training. And they make up for 97% of our exporters. Figures in other countries might differ, but I think we cannot deny the paramount role SMEs play for our societies. In Germany, we call the SMEs the backbone of our economy. Second observation, reaching at a net zero economy will be the most important task and challenge for companies, nations, and the whole world for the next decades. Climate change is the most urgent problem mankind is facing. We just went through the pandemic, and even if we are relieved now by the relaxation of the strict rules we were submitted to in the high time of that crisis in Malaysia, we need to acknowledge that on a global scale, the danger is far from being banned. And the pandemic is only a gentle breeze compared with the hurricane the climate change is presenting for us. Everywhere, in Germany as well as in Malaysia, we feel the effects of climate change already today, with the change of climate, rain, and drought patterns, with heavy rains and longer periods of drought, with floods and landslides. This is already leading to an increase of migration, an increase of conflicts about water, an increase of loss of life and property. While we still continue unabated with straining our atmosphere, scientists predicting us to have the highest CO2 output in history next year, in 2022, there is an increasing awareness for the need for action. COP26 in Glasgow is focusing our attention on the challenge of worldwide decarbonization in a period of 30 years after more than 250 years of the carbon age. There are some signs of hope. An increasing number of countries have committed themselves to ending investments in new coal plants during COP26 in Glasgow. There is an initiative for the reduction of the dangerous methane emissions by 30% until 2030. And we finally reached the $100 billion promised to be made available each year for climate projects. But will this be sufficient? Experts judge that the energy transition needs to speed up by the factor of 4 to 6 if we want to keep our goals to which we committed ourselves in the Paris Agreement in 2015. SDGs are not legally binding, but they work into the same direction. Number 13 charges us, even explicitly, with taking action to combat climate change and its impacts. But actually, this task is cross-cutting all SDGs because the word sustainable implies for all these goals the need to harmonize our activities with the preservation of the environment as the basis for all life on Earth. Agriculture, energy, industrialization, consumption and production patterns, the design of our cities and human settlements, the use of water, rivers and oceans, as well as terrestrial ecosystems such as forests. The human impact on all these fields needs to comply with the requirements of climate preservation. Reaching at a net zero economy will require full commitment of companies. There's a vast array of measures they can take, switching to clean energies, reduction of energy consumption by isolation of buildings or reduction of mobility, reduction of waste, changing production patterns, and many more. How can companies be one for this goal? As part of the society, many companies actually have already understood that they need to become carbon neutral and have to adapt their habits to this purpose. As citizens, their owners and staff feel the impact of climate change as anyone else. And as companies, they must prepare for the legal requirements which will be imposed on them in due course. This might be different from state to state, but we live in a cross-linked world, especially internationally operating companies do, and sooner or later, environmental standards will reach them. Just two examples. The background of the European idea of a European CO2 border adjustment tax is the intention to create a green level playing field for European companies subject to strict emission rules. And the German Supply Chain Act will make big companies liable for tracing intermediate goods procured abroad in all phases of their supply chain to ensure that production processes are not harmful to the environment and do not violate human rights. So companies better prepare now if they do not want to be left behind. And there is another side too. Enormous amounts of money are being made available now for climate projects. The industrialized states will fulfill now their commitment of $100 billion to this avail. The European Union has decided that 40% of the 750 billion euro support program for its member states after COVID-19 has to go into climate projects, 40% of 750 billion euro. And 1/4 of the EU multi-annual financial framework 21 to 27 of more than 1 trillion euro, 1/4 of 1 trillion euro will be devoted to environmental tasks. Similar figures exist for national budgets, for instance, the German budget. This money will not only be spent, but there will also be someone to earn it. Companies will earn it if they are smart and prepared. Third observation. Many people are confident that eventually technical progress will solve the whole climate problem. We have gone already quite a way by developing alternative sources of energy, such as wind, solar, biomass, or hydrogen power. There is research whether geoengineering can bring remedy. Solar radiation management by installment of reflectors of sunlight in space, or the injection of sulfur aerosol into the atmosphere. Various methods of decarbonization, the capturing and storage of carbon. Constant research is done on how companies can reduce their energy consumption by recycling, by developing new materials and designing new products, by cogeneration of heat and power, by substitution of meat and milk, and so on. Now, what is the impact of Industry 4.0 on energy consumption of companies? Can Industry 4.0 contribute effectively to a net zero economy? Industry 4.0 will connect machines with the internet and interconnect and link production processes with each other to optimize production value chains. In the first place, this digitization will lead to a higher consumption of electricity. The internet operates by servers who are consuming electricity 24/7. This creates heat so that they need to be cooled down, consuming even more energy. Already today, the internet is one of the main consumers of electricity. However, this is only one part of the equation. Experts estimate that below the line, Industry 4.0 will allow to reduce energy consumption because it will allow a targeted drive of machines. Flexible and computable production processes will allow for fine-tuning the use of energy. A smart grid and smart meters connect producer, consumer, and power storage so that demand of power can follow supply and not vice versa. Thus, data on energy consumption classified according to machines, daytime, source, and provider of energy can be evaluated in real time and determine the use of energy. And power storage can be engineered accordingly. Industry 4.0 can enable a more economical use of resources and an intelligently targeted energy consumption if companies take pains to develop a holistic energy concept. Studies say that the digital transformation of companies can save up to 25% of materials and energy, and also fallout and scrap can be reduced considerably. Thus, Industry 4.0 can contribute to reaching at a net zero economy. However, it cannot do without energy and will even demand more energy to operate. Therefore, reaching at a net zero economy will highly depend on our energy sources. Substitution of conventional sources such as coal, oil, and gas by renewables is the order of the day. This challenge has become more urgent than ever as our time frame is dramatically narrowing, given the unabated consumption of carbon-based energy. With a setback of economic development by the pandemic and the concomitant social repercussions, this task has become even more difficult. This, however, does not discharge us to fully commit ourselves to find ways to realize the Paris Agreement we all signed up to. SMEs can play a decisive role here. I wish this festival the energy, optimism, and innovative spirit we all need to achieve this goal. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. That was His Excellency Ambassador Dr. Peter Blomeyer, German Ambassador to Malaysia, with his keynote address leveraging IR 4.0 for the net zero economy. Thank you very much for sharing your observation as well through that keynote address. Thank you. And after listening to Dr. Peter and, of course, our previous speakers, I think this is such a timely event with COP26 happening in Glasgow at the moment. And, of course, sustainability has become a very important agenda and must be taken seriously by everyone across the globe. There's a quote, "Sustainability is no longer about doing less harm, but it's about doing more good." Right, ladies and gentlemen, it's about 4 minutes after 10. We are going for a short break until 10:30. But please drop by our exhibition booth while we're having this break, featuring our partners, Sarawak Energy Berhad and Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, and also companies such as Capital Markets Malaysia, CMM, and Bursa Malaysia Berhad. Feel free to have a chat with their representatives to understand how each organization is helping to accelerate the SDGs. Right, coming up after this break at 10:30 will be today's first panel session. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise as Ethan Hawke, but coming up at 10:30, we'll have Mission Possible. We're going to look behind the challenges and ask ourselves a question: are sustainability opportunities real? So the panelists will address that question before we delve further into the topic of sustainability in today's festival. So have a short break and I'll see you back here at 10:30 with Mission Possible. See you at 10:30.